Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Indie Insights. It's been 2 weeks since I've sat here and had the pleasure of speaking to you all. And in that time, I got married after 10 years of engagement to the wonderful Rachel. We finally had an intimate little wedding down in the beautiful South, and now I'm a married man. So if I come across more mature or sophisticated, that is why. So, everyone, today we have our wonderful Insights and Innovation webinar with our amazing partners at Blis. Blis are going to be talking to us about Rethink Identity. They've had some pretty big year with their lots of amazing things happening in their business. And today we're going to hear about from Elias and also Harry, going to be talking through all of these amazing updates and what's happening with identity. So, without further ado, Elias, I'll hand over to you, good sir, to take over.
Nice one. Thank you, Sam. And congratulations on your wedding. Very hard act to follow now, talking about privacy after your wedding. Congrats, all the best in the future, mate. Hi, everyone. It's awesome to be presenting the IMAA webinar again. Thank you again for having us. My name is Elias from Blis, and I'm here with our strategist, Harry, to talk about something near and dear to our hearts at Blis, and that's privacy. More specifically, how brands can adapt to a privacy-first world by rethinking their approach to identity. Before we get stuck into it, let us know what you think of the webinar by scanning the QR code. We'll show you the QR code again at the end. We appreciate the feedback and make sure you're very nice. Just quickly, a bit about us. We are a geo-powered omnichannel tech stack. We help brands build audiences using behavior and geo, reach them across any channel, and then measure the total impact all across the one platform which we own and operate. And we do it all without reliance on identifiers to activate audiences. More recently, you may have heard we were acquired by T-Mobile, which means we are now part of the T-Ads family with Vista, something we are very super excited about. We've got big plans, and it's awesome to have the backing of one of the largest telcos at the moment. And this is us. I'm the ANZ Regional Director here at Blis and part of the IAB Data Council, and Harry's our strategist for ANZ.
Unfortunately, Elias, being the oldest people at Blis, we also hold another title as being the Blis Boomers, which is rather incredible given the fact that we're both 26 years old.
Good.
How did that happen? But that means that we're old enough to remember when this was a thing, right? So we're all pretty familiar with the use of cookies and identifiers as a way of building audiences. But it may surprise some of the younger people on this call that for many years, it was the official way that we measured site visitation. So sites like news.com.au, the SMH would use unique browsers from Nielsen, basically cookies, to understand how many people visited their sites. And I remember this very well because way back in the day, my very first job at Nielsen as the world's worst technical account manager happened right when this was about to change. Now, this used to work when people had access to maybe one or at most two internet-connected devices throughout their day. But as cookie deletion increased and the number of connected devices that we owned also increased, the number of unique browsers inflated to the point where some sites were reporting more visitors than the entire population of Australia. That certainly didn't stop a whole heap of publishers trying to report that, which is always a bit of a laugh, but inevitably the methodology had to change. Now, that wasn't the first, nor was it the last time that the role of the cookie would change.
We all know about the use of cookies and identifiers as a way of building audiences. Through cookies and identifiers, most of us have countless internet identities, some of which may be way off. Here's a profile I ran myself ages ago, back when Oracle let you pull up your own profile. And sometimes I got it right. I'm a father of 3 boys and I'm a homeowner. But then you have this problem of falling into every bucket. I was in the market for a car, but despite my growing family, I was bucketed into everything from hatchbacks to sports cars. I do like sports cars, though. I fell into every cosmetic audience. Who knows how I ended up there? Perhaps, my wife and I were sharing the same browser. And finally, I was in every single age group, including the 65 plus, which might as well explain why I keep on getting these ads. I should retire pretty soon, to be honest. As an industry, we just accept that this is how things would always be. That was until a few years ago when all this happened. Big profile data leaks, iOS changes hitting device IDs, governments in Europe and the US introducing stricter policies, and our own government promising reform this year. Even Google themselves announced they would try cookies from Chrome, which sent shockwaves through the industry. Just as many shockwaves, and that was the latest. They made the greatest U-turn since each of John Farnham's 8 last time tours and Michael Jordan's 2 comebacks. However, this time around, whether you're reliant on identifiers or not, change is unavoidable. Firstly, there's reform. The first set of privacy reforms was released last year, with the second tranche due to be released after election when we all head to the polls on 3rd of May coming up. The reduction in device IDs from iOS changes was just the beginning, with cookies being blocked on certain browsers and identifiers reducing all the time. The way we build audiences will also need to change. With this change comes a whole new set of options, with everyone coming up with their own response to privacy changes. But cutting through the noise, we have to ask ourselves, are things like data clean rooms the future, or just smaller walled gardens? Are they truly privacy first?
And then finally, probably the most important piece of all, and that's the consumer. So yes, all of us as marketers, we all have a job to do for all of our brands to reach audiences, but we also have to be careful that we don't treat privacy as a box ticking exercise, not least because consumers really do care. So this is a recent survey from the OAIC, and it reveals that real people do care a lot about privacy. And this survey is actually being used to as part of the to inform some of the reform that we're seeing at the moment. So much so, it's privacy is the third consideration behind quality and price when choosing a brand. And unsurprisingly, consumers don't really trust us with their data. They simply just don't like the way that we currently use it for marketing purposes. In fact, as you can see here in the data, our industry is pretty much up there with real estate agents as the most distrusted when it comes to privacy. In other words, we are down there with these guys, right? No offense to any real estate agents.
Yeah, would you like our real estate friends?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, no one wants that, do they?
Should we start putting our faces on Blis logos? Is that how we should do it?
It's already begun.
Yeah. Yeah. So change is necessary, but are we ready? About a year ago, we did a survey with Sapio in the US with marketers from over 200 agencies. Almost all indicated they were concerned about what was happening with cookies and identifiers. Only half had a plan for it, and even fewer had a plan in the short to medium term as well. So there's images of Sam there going less and less. So what to do? At Blis, we don't suggest we know all the answers, nor do we believe we're the be-all or end-all solution. But having been through the privacy journey right from the very beginning, we faced GDPR in Europe back in 2018 and every privacy test in the US, which has been introduced state by state, as well as the depreciation of device IDs. Our business had to implement change at every level, so we've learned a few things along the way.
So if you're embarking on this journey with your clients, here are some points that might help you cut through the noise. So let's start with the big one first, identity. It's at the heart of how we've been building audiences in the digital age. Now, what the cookie did was it allowed all manner of segmentation across countless themes, so be it sports fans, foodies, you name it. Even as a license example demonstrated, it wasn't always as useful or accurate as we would like, but we generally accepted it. It was close enough. But with identifiers shrinking or becoming siloed, and even their existence being questioned, a lot of the focus has been on how we preserve some of the key aspects of identity in both how we build audiences and also measure success. But the question is this focus misplaced or even required? Take these Swannies fans as an example. What makes them or anybody a Swan supporter? Certainly, as you can see here from this picture, certainly not your age or your gender or even your life stage. Sure, you could probably piece together different identifiers and cookies that could get you close to this audience, but not quite as close as being seen physically at the SCG on match day. That's probably about as close as you can get as a data point. And it's not entirely reliant on identifiers. And that's the thing. There are data points out there, such as behavior, such as geo, that gets you really close to real world intent that are less reliant on identifiers. Because it doesn't matter what your email is, what sites you visit, all that matters is where you are. Now, as it stands, the data landscape is deeply, deeply fragmented. And to illustrate the point, a typical person like Sam, or it could be myself or Elias or yourself, has about 2 emails. Then those emails and accounts plug into a plethora of different devices there, right? So that ends up being about 8 identities all up, if that thing will actually pop through. There you go. Then you go down to all the things that you do on these devices, right? You could be watching maths, you could be listening to Spotify on the SMH. All these different publishers have different opt-in regulations that you, as a user, can change to allow publishers different levels of access to your data. Then suddenly you go from being one person using 2 emails, 4 devices across thousands of publishers, all who have created a disparate number of identities online that we have to piece together. And that's not even going into all the blind spots. Not all those publishers are passing identifiers. Whereas there's something like geography, everyone is somewhere. So everyone lives somewhere, works somewhere, things happen somewhere. It's universal, constant, meaning you can build audiences that can be reached across any channel, combine data sets without loss, or with minimal reliance on identifiers. And our method to reduce this reliance on identifiers is to use geo as a seed. So what we would do is we would map Swanee's fans or Swanee's audiences or foodies back to a residential postcode or a work postcode or a travel postcode. And from there, we can start to do some very interesting things by matching with other identity-free data points, like sales data, like spend data, or even the ABS. And with some clever machine learning, we can then reach this audience across any channel. We can also do a lot of very interesting things with measurement that just aren't possible with identifiers. And to illustrate that point, let's use a real life example. Let's imagine that you are Uber and you're trying to win share for Uber Eats versus Deliveroo. So let's say that you've identified your perfect audience, and there's this bloke here, it's James, and what you've done is you've worked out the best way you want to reach him, and you've got a plan ready to go. Let's say he wakes up and then he opens his phone and he checks the news on The Guardian, sees that his shares have tanked because of the tariffs, and Uber Eats or yourself sees this opportunity and serves an ad to him, which is fantastic. We got him right at the start of the day. And just by chance, he's opted in, so we get his device ID as well. So device ID 101. Then he goes to the gym, listens to Spotify, and Deliveroo this time sees an opportunity to serve him an ad. But as is often the case with some audio apps, there's no identifier attached to it, so no ID. Then he commutes to work finally at 12 p.m. after a big session on the Smith machine, passes a digital out of home site, and it just so happens that Deliveroo is serving an ad on the billboard there. But again, no ID attached to that because there's no way to tie his mobile to that out of home site. So nobody knows that he's passed it, no record of it happening really. And then lunchtime, right? He's at work, he's on the Daily Mail, checking the latest gossip. And this time he's served in a cookie now because he's opted in. But it's on a different device than the one he used in the morning. It's on his work laptop. But all the same, Uber Eats serves an ad to him. Happy days. And then finally he gets home, he's watching Survivor on Template and Deliveroo serves him an ad there. But once again, his CTV is a completely different identifier to the things that he's been using throughout the day. So no idea about what happened on his mobile or his laptop. But generally, this is what a day in the life for all of us is like, especially in terms of serving someone an ad and trying to track the identifiers that he was exposed to. But let's assume in the perfect world, it all works. So James has seen both sets of ads and it's got to him, right? So by the end of the day, he orders a pizza through Uber Eats. Amazing. Uber Eats have won the head-to-head, objective achieved. But the thing is, when that event takes place, what Uber collect It'll be something like a name or an address or an email. Because there's no digital identifiers that can be tied back, trying to attach to this series of events that happen is practically impossible. It's very, very hard, which really sucks because the marketing actually worked, except there's no way of knowing it. So from a measurement perspective, there's a flaw there, right? And it comes down to the fact that in an ID world, what you're trying to do is you're trying to attribute an ID to every action, which is really, really hard. But in a geographic world, you attribute action to a consumer's home area and you use where they live, how they work, and how they travel as data that you can connect a journey with. So when you replay James's day through a geo lens, he wakes up in 2204, which is Marrickville, goes to the gym in Petersham across the road, ends up in Surrey Hills in North Sydney throughout his working day, and then finally back to Marrickville. This sort of aggregated geodata is much easier to access and work with and not subject to the same privacy restrictions as identifiers are. And with the right tech, data science and machine learning like we've developed here at Blis, suddenly measurement becomes really, really interesting. And we'll go through what that looks like in just a second. So what it means though, it means that when you get to this point here, when this event happens this time around, Uber knows, yes, the name, address, and email. They know he lives in Marrickville and the sales event happens in Marrickville. But what we can do now on the aggregate level is we can now connect or attribute the event back to a measurement. Now, the thing is, of course, what we're not trying to do is to do this on a single individual level. But when we take an aggregated view, using geo, we can start to measure incrementality. And that opens up some really interesting measurement opportunities that are not possible when trying to tie together disparate identifiers. So when assessing partners moving forward, rather than chasing replacement for identifiers and trying to replicate that exactly, identify whether a potential partner's data actually gets you the data points you actually need. Because when you get it right, you not only get better audiences, but you also open up some interesting measurement solutions that just aren't possible with identifiers. Cool. So secondly, let's talk about some of the solutions that are currently in market. So part of the clamour to retain identifiers in some form has resulted in the rise of data clean rooms. And on the surface, they make a great deal of sense, right? There's a lot of brands and publishers sitting on some amazing data, and pulling them together to form a greater whole seems very sensible, especially if we're talking about really great first-party data derived from things like loyalty programs or memberships or even existing customers. There's probably a place for this in your media mix. And we're certainly not saying that that you don't use it, but something to consider is the fact that most consumers are light buyers of any given category. So the loyalists, those that sign up, make up a small percentage of any audience type. In fact, marketing literature also tells us that most potential customers, anywhere between 80 to 95% for any given category, are not in the market for your product or your category right now. So if you're just relying solely on a pool of current or historical customers, you're probably missing out on a massive chunk of your potential audience. So in other words, if your data is not constantly acquiring, constantly drawing from the outside, your usual customer base, your potential market, could be constantly shrinking. And furthermore, it's really important to consider costs. So if you're bidding on a smaller, theoretically more qualified pool of customers, prices tend to really only go one way. And then there's a privacy issue in itself, the most important bit. A lot of these options rely on identifiers, such as an email address. And even with encryption, one could argue that this is in itself a highly personal data point. And it seems like other people are catching on. And the Elias will cover that in just a second. So to wrap up this point, we're certainly not suggesting that these aren't great options or that they can't be part of a fantastic media strategy. But what we would strongly suggest you do is to ask potential partners how they address the acquisition problem. How do they find you new customers and keep your audience base constantly replenished? And also consider cost as well. If everyone's competing for the same single universal ID, probe vendors and potential partners on how they pass these costs on. So, how to implement change. I'm a massive Beatles nerd. I'm so crazy about them that I can probably tell you just by looking at their haircuts that the first photo was taken in 1962 when they first signed a record deal, and the bottom one was in 1969 when they recorded their last album and then broke up. And the thing is, if you know anything about the Beatles, is that in just a handful of years, they went from being pop idols, playing really simple but catchy rock and roll love songs, to being these incredible innovators and trailblazers. So many of the techniques we use in music today were invented by them. But what some people might not know is that they took a lot of incremental steps along the way. They didn't head straight there. So right from the very beginning, they loved a lot of R&B and soul music, African American music and blues, and they incorporated a lot of that into their songs. They're exposed to things like classical, right, which they put on songs like Yesterday. Dylan was a massive influence on them eventually. It made their lyrics more mature. Dylan also introduced them to the ganja as well, and then all bets were off, right? They became massive experimenters in the studio, in and out of the studio, incorporating things like theatre into music. Took some more substances along the way, studied Hindu, the avant-garde, and then maybe a few more substances until they were finally making masterpieces. And it's in that spirit, minus the drugs, unfortunately or fortunately, that we have worked with a lot of our clients in helping guide them into the privacy-first world. So many of our clients have long existing relationships with the trade desk or DV360, which is really fantastic, right? We never suggest dumping them, but instead what we do is we offer to fill in the rest of the market that they might not have access to. And we find that works really, really well. So say, for instance, the trade desk gives you really great access to Chrome browsers, but not so much on iOS. We tend to help fill in that gap. And what that does then is that it allows you to also benefit from the test and learn aspect of incremental change. It allows you to see what works, what doesn't, all without ripping up the playbook. In this real life example, we showed that we can lower overall costs compared to the trade desk, and this showed that we can be complementary, if not a replacement to some potential partners. And the last time I'll toot our own horn, our biggest proof point is probably our acquisition by T-Mobile. So when they started off with us, they started really small on individual campaigns. They were using us alongside other partners. And then over the years, they went on to white label our platform until finally about a month ago, they brought us up. And it was this incremental approach that helped bring it to life. The thing is, wholesale change is really challenging. And we're speaking with a lot of clients with long-standing dependence on identifiers. We don't recommend ripping up the playbook. Instead, taking the incremental approach allows you to fill in the gap, but also test and compare options at a pace that doesn't jeopardize current ways of working.
And finally, privacy itself. Sure, there's a big game of musical chairs going on at the moment for advertising next new normal, but it's easy to forget the original point of it all, the right for consumers to have agency in how their data is used. And what's at stake here is the long term of trust of consumers. As you can see, as tech companies are right in the red there. There's a lot of publishers and vendors talking about how they new privacy solutions and how they put privacy first. But just how private are they? We first spoke about cookies being invasion of privacy. Isn't emails more so sometimes when you think about that? But just a couple of weeks ago, a lawsuit was filed in California questioning the traders' unified ID 2 solution of alleging they violated privacy laws. At the heart of the matter was the use of emails as an identifier, which, let's face it, it seems very, very personal. It will be interesting to see how this plays out. But this raises an important point about what we should do. Ask questions, probe, and understand. When speaking to potential partners, ask how they collect and store data. understand what data they use, understand how they conform to regulations, and how transparent they are about their practices and their partners they use. Harry and I know a bit, but we have an entire privacy and compliance team here at Blis, and everything is there on our website in plain English. Every partner you speak to should have something similar. Beyond transparency, check how potential partners have operated in strict compliance conditions in other markets. How they conducted affairs, they will tell you a lot about what they will do here and how ready they are for what's coming. Keeping us accountable not only safeguards your investment, but it goes a long way in improving the quality of advertising for all of us. Privacy is important, and by being thorough, we can all ensure that we improve advertising for everyone. In conclusion, yes, there are challenges ahead as we all get used to a new way of advertising. But as we covered, there are incremental steps and signposts to follow that will make that transition not only smoother, but produce better outcomes. We shouldn't be afraid of change. Instead, we should be excited because an opportunity exists to make advertising better for everyone. We should be embracing it. And that's the most exciting thing. If we get it right, everyone wins. By rethinking identity, embracing privacy, consumers consume content without their data being exploited, and publishers get to monetize their content, and brands can promote their brand more effectively and impactfully. Thank you so much. That's the rest of our presentation today. If you go on to the next slide, thank you all for listening. Please scan this QR code for your feedback. Your thoughts and feedback are welcome. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Sam, and the IMAA team.
Thank you, Elias. Thank you, Harry. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Blis, for your support of the independent sector and keeping it moving. Thank you so much. Thank you, members. Thanks for tuning in. Just a quick reminder, NTs, one more spot left. Cans in Cans, the cocktail party on the Monday, and also the walk and talk on the Wednesday. That'll be a bit of fun. We've got Pitchella coming up for all the people involved with FLOT. We have got that event for networking catch-ups this week, and also in Melbourne. I think it'll be in a few weeks' time. Census is going out soon. Queensland's coming up, and the Byte series is going to be announced soon. So fill out that QR code, guys, if you could. It helps us out. It saves me annoying people. And thank you, guys. Have a great day and a great week. Cheers. A short week as well.
Hey, guys.